right. Welcome to the next version of our live streams here on YouTube. We're going to be going over some chromatic cells today and chromatic language. So I'm looking forward to working here with you guys. All right. So I think I'm going to play a little bit as we get started here. Play some rhythm changes, including these chromatic cells here. Cells in my improvising here over rhythm changes, just kind of beginning to kind of get into how to play chromatically and move around and feel comfortable using different chromatic cells and things while improvising. And these are my 4 methods and 4 steps of doing so that we're going to go over today. Feature live here, so if you have any questions or anything, just make sure to put them in the chat. I'd love to talk about and listen to you guys, and use whatever things you want to go over when it comes to this kind of playing, or just saxophone questions in general. So without any delay, we're going to be going over some, like I said, 4 different methods to chromatic playing. This first method is from our 64 melodic cell exercises book with jazz lesson videos. In this chromatic cell exercise, there's 2 on this page. This is like my first layer of getting into chromatic playing. It's really like knowing how to play them on your instrument first, feeling comfortable to playing them just as a technique exercise almost. So we have these chromatic cells here that are going like basically through all 12 tones. So we're playing each of our 12 tones in our tonal system here, our 12-tone system. And that's at the beginning of each of these 4-bar systems is that note, right? So that's like really our... So that's kind of where the cell ends or begins, I guess, is at the beats 1 and beats 3 of every bar. And we're just playing the chromatic scale and then back up to C. So... and so on, right? So we're just moving around that system up and down chromatically, right? So down a half step, up a whole step, down a half step, up a whole steps. And it's fun to play this up and down chromatically like we have written here, but you can also do them in different systems. You can do them up and down in minor thirds, major thirds, perfect fourths. In the circle of fourths. I like doing them sometimes in minor thirds, like getting that diminished sound. Just playing that same cell over those 3, those 4, tonal centers, a minor third apart. But this, what we have written here is just playing them up and down chromatically. I like to use this as a warm-up. It's kind of a finger twister in some regard, kind of warming up our fingers. But also getting that chromatic sound in my ear. I'm still leaning towards like the beats 1 and beats 3 of every bar. It's almost like a resolution point or a target point for my ears to latch onto. And then when we go down, the pattern remains the same, except, every 4 notes is going down by half step instead of up. So we have half step down, whole step up, half step down. And so on, right? So you can practice this in 2 octaves, try and do full range. This is kind of a fun line to use and implement also, which we'll talk about in a little bit, how to apply to improvising, but really good for technique on your instrument. This is another version of a chromatic cell here. This is chromatic cell number 2 from our 64 melodic cell exercises. Also, if you want to purchase one of these, right now we're doing a special. If you use the code RD5, you get a percentage off. I think it's 5% off of these books that we're going over today. So if you're on the lookout to add some chromaticism to your playing, these are some great assets and great resources to use. This is all things that Chad taught me when I was playing and taking lessons with him during my undergrad degree, and it really helped open up my ears. All the links are in the description for the masterclass. So chromatic cell number 2 is basically the opposite version of what we just played. So instead of going down to a whole step, playing half step, whole step, going down, we do it going up. So now we have C to D flat to D to C. Another version of this chromatic cell, but now we're going using the whole steps, or excuse me, using the half steps up rather than the half steps down. That was the first one. Here's the second one. Right, using that. Then the same thing when we descend. Sorry. That was a little bit trickier, having to do the ascending version, but now descending, right? So we're still going up in those half steps, but then we have to create the descending version of this by going down a half step, right? So up a half step, down a whole step, or excuse me, up a half step, down a whole step, up a half step. It can be a little bit of a brain twister. And so on, right? So we want to try and get really proficient at these so that when we want to add them to like a 2-5-1 phrase or just like rhythm changes like what I was doing when I opened up the masterclass, you want to be kind of feeling like you're fluid with these under our fingers, so it's a little bit easier to play them eventually in a harmony instance. For example, if I play a 2-5-1 in G, so A, D7, G major. I like to try and play the 2 chord like an arpeggio. And then resolve this G. And practice different versions of that. So I'm practicing A minor to D7 to G, and then on the D7 chord, my second bar of my 2-5, I'm playing a chromatic cell, or a couple chromatic cells, and then I resolve to G. I'm kind of practicing in that, applying it to harmony aspect, rather than just kind of moving them up and down chromatically. So that's what I would work on as far as the first step of getting this more into your ears, into your playing, is to really feel like you're got them under your fingers and you can almost hear them a little bit more. Maybe start singing them, so that when you're in a playing standpoint, they're more in your under your fingers and in your ears, like I said before. So that is the first part of the exercise I want to talk about, or kind of getting this down. The other part is thinking about them in context to approach notes or chords. or really harmony, right? Also, if there's any questions in the chat, feel free to use the chat function to ask some questions. I'm going to keep an eye on that as best as I can, and would love to answer any live questions that you guys have. So, for this aspect of playing chromatic cells and kind of learning how to hear these and put them into your playing, we can use these as approach tones. So these are 3-note chromatic approach tones on a C major chord. And what we have listed here, this is from our book called Melodic Chromaticism. So we're kind of adding chromaticism to changes, basically, and how we can approach them or come from them or play around them, enclose them, that kind of things, but with chromaticism, notes that are not in our chords, right? So in C major, we have C, E, G, and B that we can approach from above, from below, and enclosing, meaning like one from above, one from below, and then our target tone. So we have all these different versions of them on this page, and what we want you to do is to practice them in the way that we have written here, and then try and improvise with them. So, reading through from the root, approaching the root from above with 3 notes. You can make up your own versions of these. Make them all chromatic. Same thing when coming up to them. Adding different chromatic tones. So you do that from the root of maybe a couple keys, then do it from the do it to the 3rd, then the 5th, then the 7th, and then we go back to the root, and now we'll do those enclosures. One from above, now from below, above from the 3rd now, below, above from to the 5th, now from the 7th, right? So you can add these different shapes to your playing and just thinking about C major. So I like to add diatonic language in front or behind these little lines. I'm going to play this shape, and then I'm going to play an arpeggio after that. So up C. So I went E, G, B, D, C. That's my little enclosure into an arpeggio. Works really well over a major chord and sounds real nice. Then I do the same thing from the 5th. Now from the root. Up to the 9th. There's another one going to the 6th, and then you can do that same thing going to approaching it from below. Right? So you're adding all these, chromaticism around a chord. You're kind of thinking about this in context of C major or whatever major chord you're on. Adding an enclosure and then playing an arpeggio. You can do the same thing where you play an arpeggio and then add an enclosure. So you can add, you're just trying to get back to a 1, 3, 5, or 7, you can add some chromaticism to that. Add some of those cells that we talked about in the first section if you want to add a enclosure like we have here, but you're kind of sectioning your practice to be arpeggio and then enclosure or approach tone. So I'll use an approach tone here. So I'm still thinking about C major as my tonal center. But I'm just adding chromatic notes around those chord tones. But C is still my number 1 home tonality key. So I just experiment around with reading down this page and feeling more comfortable playing enclosures and approach tones around this sort of idea of keeping the home key in mind and always resolving the chord tone. Thinking those are your notes that you can go to, and then add chromaticism from there. And you're just continuing to practice in that mindset of here are my root chord and my chord tones. Let me add chromaticism around that and approaching that. So that would be the next step to adding some of this into your playing. And doing this in all different kinds of keys, right? You know, A flat is harder than C, and F sharp is harder than, you know, the more sharps and flats you add, the harder it may become. But it's still a really, really good exercise to have in your fingers and your memory of adding chromaticism into your playing. So here's another example of this, kind of what I talked about in that last example. This is another example from one of our books. This is Applications to Phrases, Modern Phrases package. So you can grab that again using my discount code RD5 for some percentage off of these books. So basically, this is kind of like the written out version of what I was just talking in chromaticisms, or approach tones and include. We were talking about in that last PDF, you know. This is a little bit less arpeggio based, but we're adding chromaticism to the sound. So that's our sound here. And in this vamp phrase, you know, we're thinking about C7 as our home base, but we're adding a bunch of chromaticism and then eventually resolving. So that first one up there, I'll zoom in on it. So we have a little pattern there that we're playing through a cycle. You know, playing that up in half steps for 3 bars, and then we use this phrase to get us back to a chord tone of C7, which is B flat. So we're getting back to that tonality or passing or cell. When we go to the next one, we have a different version of that here in that second line. So we're adding all these chromatic passings. You know, that those are not, you know, necessarily tonalities in C. You know, those are definitely not in the tonality of C, but we're getting back to C with our last 2 tones here, E and C, right? So we can move these chromatic passings around and then resolve after a 4-bar phrase, all good. So then, you know, making up your own versions of these exercises is great. So maybe I'll start. Now when I get to that F natural or E does. I get back to my C chord. So I'm starting out with the same C, you know, same 2 measures as this exercise here, and then once I get to those and finish those, I make my own version of getting back to my C, E, G, or B flat. Right? Now, this is just something I used to practice when I was doing lessons with Chad. You know, he would give me these PDFs, and I'd be practicing them and really trying to get the ones that he wrote down where I understood them, but then be able to improvise with them, because I'm not going to have this sheet up when I'm soloing, you know, or on a gig, right? I want to have them in my ear, and I want to be comfortable enough with them to where I can manipulate them. I'm always trying to get back to my 1, 3, 5, and 7 of this vamp, but anywhere else I can go, or just whatever my finger patterns or my fingers are used to playing these cells by practicing them in these 4 different ways that we're talking about today. So let me go on to the next one. So super chromatic at the end. I really like the way that it ends. So I'll start my own version of it, and then I'll try and end it the way that that one does. So I'm just adding my own chromaticism, but still thinking about how can I get to G, or well, G in this case, but E, C, G, or B flat. So then you can just practice this all day long, thinking about that's your home base, but everything else can be manipulated and moved around. You just play as many chromatic cells as you want. E, G, C, and B flat. And then you just do this in a couple different keys. You know, maybe go to A flat. Now A flat, C, E flat, F sharp, or G flat is your home base. Try and play some chromatic cells, but then resolve to those. Just practice a lot, you know, in context of a tune, in context of a 2-5-1, in context of a lot of different things. Try and think about these in the way of resolving. These are supposed to add tension. They almost are their own chromatic. It's almost like its own harmonic device. You know, like we play diminished over dominant chords, or like different kind of scales, whole tone, to like create a sound. In this case, what we're going to do is like thinking about this from a standpoint of it's almost a harmonic device. So it's like on a specific chord, you're going to play really chromatic on the 4th bar of this vamp to my 1, 3, 5, or 7. Like that's the most important part of these chromaticisms. You know, you can play as many different patterns as you want. There are 4 are to try and help you resolve and teach your ear how to resolve to these different kinds of chromaticisms in context of what chord you're on. So, you know, being able to just feel more flexible playing these in different keys. So I'd spend like maybe 30 minutes just thinking about C7. How many different ways can I play enclosures around those notes, or chromatic cells, but then always resolve to my, right? Changes, that's a really fun example, you know, because rhythm changes is in one key for a really long time. But I always try and resolve back to my 1 chord in that case, which is C major for me, playing B flat. So there's an example of a solo I want to check out here. Let me make sure I have it. Yes, here we go. So this is an example of one of my favorite Michael Brecker solos. We should be able to hear this all together. Him playing Olio, and there's a specific A section that play these chromatic cells in the context of applying them to improvising. So let's check this out here. We'll listen to him play the head too. Right there in that A section, you know, he's playing just that little chromatic cell, you know, up in half steps over the A section of rhythm changes, you know. So that's something that you can just, you know, start to implement into your practicing. You know, maybe put it on a backing track of Olio, and just start your solo the way that Michael Brecker just played that A section. So, you know. And then, you know, go on to the bridge after that. But, you know, just taking these ideas and like immediately applying them. That's like the fourth step. So first step would be to, you know, practice them as a technique exercise in your, you know, in your warm-up, you know, just playing those little cells in all 12 keys. Those two that we looked at. Then being able to think about them in the context of a chord, playing them our surrounding chord tones. You know, those things that we worked on in the second method. Third method, thinking about them in a context of a vamp chord. So then you're using all different kinds of these chromatic cells, but you're thinking about how you resolve them. You know, you're thinking about how do you resolve them to a one chord of some kind, or whatever your one chord is. And then the last step would be to apply them. Play that shape that Michael Brecker just played. Let's see if we can back it up a little bit. So he starts. You know, so that little section right there. Try and just start your improvising, you know, transcribe a little bit of it. Try and start your solo on that, or maybe in the middle of your solo, add that in. Sorry. Just implementing things so that you can hear it, and you're kind of thinking about these chromatic cells in more than just chromatic cells. They're a harmonic device in this instance, in this context. You know, you're playing them over oleo, you're playing them over rhythm changes, but they're a harmonic device. You know, you're using these in context of how to play them over changes or in changes, but you're using them in that kind of way. So, do you have any questions? You know, I'm trying to check out the chat here. Make sure I'm listening to all you guys on the chat here. Like I said, these PDF books are really great resources for practicing this kind of modernized vocabulary. You know, really thinking about this from a perspective of a harmonic device, also a great way of playing them technique-wise on your instrument. You know, just being more flexible with this kind of stuff. I like to practice these in all different kinds of ways, like I said, over tunes, over progressions. You know, I even write out my own versions of these class on a chord. And then resolve to my one chord. Just experiment around with playing different ways of getting to your one chord, using this as a harmonic device on your 5 chord. So I just practice different versions of that. Write some down, maybe put them through different keys and stuff like that. Reinvent your own ideas. Maybe steal the one that Michael Brecker did, or steal one that someone that you really like does. And then reinvent it, implement it, improvise with it. Sense of this as like I talked about all throughout this session, as a harmonic device and as a nice technique exercise for your finger memory and such. You know, it's kind of a two-way street when it comes to this kind of practicing and playing. So that's how I would implement PDF books as great resources on how you can kind of visualize how these work and playing D flat and E flat and F flat on a C7 chord. How can that work? But these PDFs really give a good example on how you can navigate that and make it sound really cool and modern, in the context of adding chromaticism to your playing. So if anybody has any questions, hello from Brazil, I'll definitely take them now. I'm going to wrap up this session in a few here. Those are my 4 steps of how to add chromaticism with our jazz lesson video PDF books. Again, the books that were mentioned, I know they're in the description, were 64 Melodic Cells, Melodic Chromaticism book, and Modern Phrases package are the ones that we were working on today. And then that Michael Brecker solo was also implemented. His solo, it's a live solo on YouTube from 1983, playing some live venue somewhere. Adding that chromaticism to his improvising there is a really great way to listen to it and add it. Coltrane's also someone that does it. Joe Henderson does it and practice it. So I will. Okay, here we go. I really appreciate that. Thanks for the nice compliment. Hello from Atlanta. This is great. Anybody have any questions before we end the session here? I think I'm going to leave it at that. Make sure that you use the RD5 code to get 5% off these PDF books this week and for coming to this masterclass. We're going to be trying to do these more often. So if you have any topics that you want us to talk about or cover, definitely let us know in the description or in the chat or the comments below. And make sure you subscribe to Jazz Lesson videos for more of this content. And definitely check out all the PDFs and things of vocabulary. We'll be happy to help out and chat more. I'm going to be signing off for now. Great talking and chatting with you guys. Hope you enjoyed the lesson, and I'll be seeing you later. Have a great one.